Welcome back. During this video, I'm going to teach you the next 5 closing techniques, which include the just suppose close, the sudden death close, the sharp angle close, the instant reverse close, and the change places close. Now, the just suppose close is a technique that you use when the prospect says that he can't afford what you are selling. You reply and say, Mr. Prospect, just suppose that price is not an obstacle and that we can deal with your price concerns to your complete satisfaction. Can we do that just for a moment so that I can finish my presentation? The prospect will usually say, okay. By the time you get to the end of the presentation, you should have explained the value of what it is you are selling in such detail that when you tell him the price, he will see that it makes sense. When you mention the price and they say, wow, that's a lot of money, what they're really saying is, you haven't given me enough reasons to justify that price. Remember that a price objection is really a price question. A price question is when he says, that's too expensive. What he is asking is, from what you told me so far, I don't see how you can charge so much for your product or service. Can you give me some more information? Remember that it's not the price, but the reasons for the price that are most important. You say, Mr. Prospect, it may sound like a lot of money, but let me tell you why it costs what it does and why it is worth every penny. You then explain the value of your product that more than justifies the amount you charge for it. Be proud of your prices. When the prospect says things like, it costs too much, or you charge more than your competition, you say, Mr. Prospect, you're right. As a matter of fact, it costs $1,227 more than our closest competition. And yet, we sell thousands of these every year to very intelligent people like yourself. Would you like to know why? You then go on to explain why people buy from you and continue to buy even at higher prices. You have to get price out of the way at the beginning. Other than that, it just sits there like a big orangutan in the middle of the path between you and the sale. Let's move on to the sudden death close. The sudden death close is a technique you use as an ultimatum. You've had an experience where you've made a presentation to a person or to a company, and they've looked at it and not made a decision. Then you've gone back to see them, and they said they still had to think about it and a little bit more. And you go back again, and they tell you they still have to think about it a little bit longer. They won't give you an answer, yes or no. After 4 or 5 visits, you find that you're spending too much time going back to this person who won't make a decision. It's time for the sudden death close, which works successfully about 50% of the time. Here's how you use it. You fill out the entire sales contract with all details, except for the signature, exactly the way you've discussed the product or service up to now with this customer. You then take it back to the prospect and you say, Mr. Prospect, we've discussed this quite a bit now, and I know this is taking up a lot of your time. It's taking up a lot of my time as well, but you don't say that. And either this is a good idea for you or it's not. So one way or another, let's make a decision right now. What do you say? You then take out the contract, put your pen on top of it, slide it across the desk and say, if you'll just authorize this, we can get started right away. You then sit in complete silence. Remember, after every closing technique, the key is to shut up. The key to the effectiveness of this technique is to be perfectly silent and wait. Sometimes the silence can go on for several minutes or even longer. But the longer you wait quietly without speaking, the more likely it is that the prospect will buy. The greater the tension, the more likely the sale. The only pressure that you're allowed to use as a professional in a sales presentation is the pressure of the silence after you've asked a closing question. And the basic rule is this: the person who speaks first loses after the closing question has been offered. The best time to close a sale is at the end of your presentation, not the next day or come back next week or let me think about it. The prospect has more information and is closer to making a decision at the end of the sales presentation at any other time. So ask them to buy. The next technique is called the sharp angle close. You use this close when the prospect wants the product and is bringing up all sorts of what we call smoke screen objections. these are not serious reasons for not buying. They're just excuses for not going ahead with the sale right now. For example, they say, well, I don't know if we can afford the monthly payments. With a sharp angle or bear trap close, you turn the objection around and you use it as a reason for buying. You say, if we could spread the payments over a longer period and get them down, would you take it? You use this objection as a way of closing by answering it with a solution and then asking for the order. You close on the objection. The prospect says, I don't think that your product will perform to my specifications. You say, if we can prove to you that it will, would you take it? The prospect says, well, I don't think you can get it here on time. You immediately say, if we can get it to you on schedule, would you take it? This approach forces the prospect to say either, yes, I'll take it, or that's not the real reason why I'm not making a buying decision. This gives you a chance to uncover exactly why the prospect is hesitating. Now let's talk about the instant reverse close. The instant reverse close is a technique that you can use all the time. It takes a little bit of courage to use the first time, but it's very effective. Let us say that a prospect says, I can't afford it. You immediately respond by saying, that's exactly why you should buy it. The prospect will react with surprise. What? How do you mean? You then say, that's exactly why you should take it, Mr. Prospect. And then you explain how and why he will benefit from paying more than he was expecting for what you are selling. You may not even have an answer when you say this initially, so you have to think of an answer very quickly. The answer just has to be logical. It doesn't have to be great. It just has to be logical. Here's another way you can use the instant reverse close. You call a prospect to arrange an appointment, and the prospect on the line says, I'm not interested. You say, Mr. Prospect, that's exactly why I'm calling. The prospect will be caught off guard. What? Mr. Prospect, most of our very best customers were not interested when I first contacted them, but now they've become our best customers and they recommend us to their friends. The prospect will usually respond by saying, really? Well, what is it then? And then you say, that's exactly what I would like to show you, and I just need 10 minutes of your time. And immediately you move on to close on the appointment. A prospect says, we don't use that in our house. You say, that's exactly why you should take it. He'll say, why? You respond with, well, if you keep using the same product, Mr. Prospect, you'll never have any idea that there could be a better product that is available on the market. And then you proceed to ask for a few minutes to show the prospect how your product or service is better or more affordable than they might have thought. The next technique is called the change places close. The close is very simple. You're giving a presentation and the prospect will not tell you the key issue, the number one reason why he or she won't buy. As you know, for every product or service that a person can buy, there is a key benefit that they want, and there's a key issue or key objection that is stopping them from buying it. And until you can find out what that key objection is and deal with it, they will never buy from you. Many of your closing techniques are ways of getting the person to tell you what is stopping them from making a decision. Here is how you use the change places close in this situation. You say, Mr. Prospect, would you change places with me just for a second? Please put yourself in my shoes, which prospects will do if they are at all empathetic. You say, imagine if you were talking to someone that you really respected and you were showing them a product or service that was really good for them, and they wouldn't tell you why it is they wouldn't make a decision one way or another. What would you do if you were in my position? Almost invariably, the prospect will say, well, I'll tell you why I'm hesitating. And he will give you the reasons why he is hesitating, enabling you to answer them and go on with the sale. You can simply ask, Mr. Prospect, what would you do if you were in my position? To prompt him to give you more information, you can say, tell me, is it the money? If it's not the money, he will say, no, it's not the money. You can then ask, well, may I ask what it is that is causing you to hesitate? He may then say, yes, it is the money. You can then say, Mr. Prospect, what will we have to do to satisfy you on that point? Or, what will we have to do a deal today? Or, How far apart are we financially? These are powerful closing questions. Sometimes you will find that you are very close on the price. You may find out that it is another issue that's holding them back. Sometimes people say that they will not pay over X number of dollars because their brother-in-law just got one like it for X number of dollars. And you could find yourself just a few dollars apart. So you'd ask them, how far apart are we? Or, Mr. Prospect, what do we have to do a deal today? You tell me and I'll find out if it's possible. Most people are pretty honest. He will say, well, this is what we would have to do a deal. And you say, okay, let me see what I can do. And at least you're still in the game. You're still in the ring. You still have a chance to make the sale. Well, I've just covered a few different kinds of closes, and in the next video, I'm going to teach you 5 more techniques in my 24 Techniques for Closing the Sale series.